I'm assuming we're back. Alright. Do people even need to refresh anymore when streams go down? Alright, well my dropped frame counter got reset, so that's nice, I guess. Yeah, so there are 2 levels people didn't have to play, so they might as well just not play one of them. You know, very good kind of way to handle it. A very elegant solution to that matter. But what about now? DLC 3. We were able to try a different solution to the problem. This was a bigger problem because there are only 4 teams. There are only going to be 4 maps. I could have asked teams to make more maps, like some teams make 2 maps per week. That'd be pretty rough, you know? That's a lot of maps to make. The teams would be big enough, in theory, in order to make sure that they happen. But I could just have 4 maps per week. What if I made it so you couldn't compete on one of them? Well, that makes for some kind of small leaderboards, actually, and they're already kind of small in the first place. So, maybe not the best idea. Then I had the idea to split up the maps with, you know, with break week, and that worked well with if you're gonna make 2 maps for 2 weeks at a time, just be on separate groups, and then you can play the map that you didn't make. You know, seems like a good solution, honestly. I don't think it worked out that well, though. The result of not playing your own levels is you kind of lose interest in the playtesting aspect. So it influences the design, even if they're not intending it to. We're not trying to like be mean to other players, as a funny way to put it was referred to once. Because people are gonna have to play these levels. We don't. If people aren't gonna have fun playing these levels, then they're not gonna play in the league. So Attack Atlantis, that got reeled back in a lot more. So you know, good decision there. As a result of that, I like to think that Attack Atlantis got far more votes on favorite map. Probably a good decision, right? But then we have other situations, like for some of these other levels, they didn't really go through as much feedback. Like I was able to do very little during week 3. Attack Atlantis, those guys kind of came to me more than any of the other teams. And Dello kind of tried to ask for a lot of feedback, but he was at least able to get it from my teammates. And I was able to, you know, trust that things worked out for weeks 3 and 4. And, well, we always get mixed feedback. So next time, should people play their own levels? Honestly, I think so. I have an idea that we could use to incorporate into that. Actually, I have a different kind of thing that we can do in the format. So, let me talk about how this potential idea could work. This isn't how it would work, but there are ideas, and these are some of the pieces. So imagine that the map making team is required to create videos showing decent runs, showing what it would be like. And maybe they're only required to you know, get a good run. And then you're kind of like asking the best players to route it out, basically, and test it out. And yeah, developer trial times. That's basically what I'm getting at. That idea, if people make these videos, and they can still compete on the maps, if they do this, especially with hidden replays. We're confirming that they don't have any stupid strats, for one, addressing a DLC 1 possible issue. We're addressing that they now have to playtest their maps. They're required to submit a video, and that gets verified by somebody, probably a third party in this case, that they're not doing anything stupid. Like, you know, hey, we hit a secret jorf into a clip section over here that nobody else is going to figure out. And that's why we have a 25 for our time. No one will beat that. And because no one will beat it, we will win the bounty. No one will beat our developer time trial thing. Obviously, that should be discouraged. But imagine that map makers can set these times for maps. They have ample time for this testing, especially if they adhere to a gameplay draft being available on Wednesday of the week, because that's less time than they get to actually playtest, as intended. And then they have all this other time to actually test out the level. It addresses the idea of maps being more polished for gameplay because they get tested. You can decide to edit the level in the moment. Be like, hey, this kind of sucks to grind here. Hey, you know, maybe 20 dashes in a row might be a little bit much. I'm thinking 10 or even 5 is better. Pretty much anything over 5 is kind of eyebrow raising in my opinion. For like, you know, you can go a pretty long distance in 5 dashes when you get a boost, and even if you don't get a big boost. So like, what is even the point for the 6th dash, right? So if you're thinking like, is there even a point for a 6th dash? Why are there 20? Because we already have that execution test in 5 dashes. So, you know, really thinking about levels like Zealous Zips there makes you think about it. Now, seems like a good idea to have these times that the map makers can set. It seems like a good way to get people playtesting the levels. How exactly I want to work it out, I'm not sure. But we can have people do that. We can have people do that within their teams. We can also choose to have people not on their team do that. I could make map drafts public, and then they're available to everybody. The more things that are available to everybody, though, and the earlier that is the case, especially if they're cooperating in map development, all teams together cooperating in map making, then, I mean, we kind of have an interesting scenario where there's one team that's in charge of it, but another team might make a suggestion. Some strats are going to end up looking like other strats, and there will be less unique replays that we watch at the end of it, most likely. Not necessarily, but could be the case. It requires a lot of trust that people will contribute, and, well, we're gonna end up seeing very few people actually contribute, most likely anyway. But that's okay. We only need a few. My frames. Alright, so a little twist to that idea. What if we had different times for different tiers? So let's imagine there are different tiers of gameplay. Sure, we had 3 tiers this time. Maybe there are 5 tiers in the future. Maybe there are 5 goal times that each map has for the SS category. And we're like, hey, you could get a 20 or a 22 or 24 or like a 30 or something else. And maybe you get as many points as what group you end up in. And this is kind of related to something that I actually wanted to do at the beginning with DLC 1. And it was like, do I want to go by scores or do I want to go by times? And Coincidentally, every time we've always used scores, especially because these last two DLCs really kind of needed it a little bit more than the other than DLC 1. But I do really want to go back to the idea of trying to use time as a measurement to, score things. Like the sum of ILs of time is a pretty interesting kind of thing to think about. Really separates the top even more in one respect. And it gives people different kinds of goals if they're competing against themselves rather than others. Because maybe we're not talking about how you're placing on the leaderboard anymore. We're just talking about like what your second is. So, imagine something like GoldenEye, where there are giant ties for every second of gameplay, because that's the way the in-game timer works. It just truncates it right there. Hey, you got a 37? It's a 37. So you're stuck there with all the 37s. In Dustforce, a lot of levels kind of work out to work better as a half second, in my opinion, when you think about it. Our levels are shorter than GoldenEye on average. But this kind of distinction of like second, half second, that loses a lot of appeal when you're starting to talk about the actual short levels. Like any percent is greatly affected and would probably need something more like a 0.1 threshold. Yeah, even stuff like GoldenEye would probably benefit from half second. But GoldenEye, they like what they have, probably. It's a very interesting kind of thing to compare to, because they have that system. There's also stuff like Mario Kart Double Dash. They have different rankings for different like tiers that everybody falls into. Standards, that's what it's called. And I don't know how it works in every kind of game, but I mean, there are a lot of different formats out there. There are a lot of different things we could do, and I'm very interested in trying as many different things out as I can. Like, I don't want to do the same thing every time. And that's something that DLC is pretty good about. So we'll try to keep it that way. We'll stay grounded. We'll still keep it Dustforce, but we can do something different. In-game time, I do think is a good idea in general, and I haven't really liked not being able to include it. And with that kind of map making playtesting idea, where there could be different goal times, seems like a good opportunity to revisit in-game time again. There are also little spin-offs you could do with this idea, like what if that goal time is hidden and you don't know if you're going to beat it or not? You don't know, maybe you don't know what tier you fall into. That's probably not as desirable, because you kind of want certain kinds of goals. Like, I want to be in the 34s, but maybe you can do like wagers. That was a suggestion. You could bet points that you beat the secret goal time. That's cool at the top level, at least. We could do this more like achievements or medals, like a participation trophy kind of thing. So imagine a DLC 4 that's a very, very open format. You play what you want to play, what leaderboards you want to play. You just play them. You don't have to sign up for them. And there are a lot of different goal times that you can get. If there's a level you don't want to compete on, it doesn't have to count for you. There could be certain goal thresholds that everybody is aiming to get. Like, hey, you want to be at least this amateur time. You want to be at least the expert time somewhere. And if you don't want to play the level, don't play it. We can have it not count. With that in mind, if scoring were to use a similar system like that, it would actually be pretty hard to balance something like that. So there would need to be some changes made. Probably at least in terms of world record having a distinction, or top 10 having a distinction. And maybe like within some tiers, I don't know if there would be real tiers exactly in this format, because you could be placed in your tiers based on what spot you're in, what time you end up getting. Which is a difference between active players and like active bad players and inactive good players. They're very comparable. Kind of tricky where they should both end up. But we want to avoid too many ties, because you know then every team is going to end up tied. That's undesirable too. But maybe those players that aren't as good or aren't going to be as active, what if they didn't score at all in this kind of model? What if they only got like the participation trophy of like what individual tier they fell in each time? Great time to drop frames. That'd be a funny time to drop the stream. You know, what if they didn't play at all and stream? But still, you know, what if they didn't have to play? What if they didn't have to worry about scoring, because like they're only on the team as like a hang around kind of thing. You know, maybe they only play maps and they'll just kind of casually play the levels, and they can earn their you know, they can earn their participation trophy for what tier they reach. Lots of interesting ideas when you start to think about it from this perspective. If I had to guess, DLC 4 will end up something similar to what I just described. Like there will be similarities, maybe not that similar after all. It'll probably have the multiple interval deadlines, where you know there's not really any point to sniping every deadline as much, because it's not just one deadline that you can snipe at the end. But this does only work for some categories, like SS, and overall SS at that. This would not easily support things like gimmicks, but gimmicks could be easily supported by this kind of participation trophy kind of thing alone, where, you know, there might be a goal time for a gimmick, and a lot of people play the gimmicks just because they can. They're not trying to be competitive on them. So maybe there's a reward for world record, or like top 3 of being on that gimmick leaderboard. Maybe only some players will be eligible for something like that, the ones that signed up for it. Unclear what we would do. But we could do a, hey, like, you got the low jump trophy. Good job. Like, you participated on your team and got these accolades. You know, kind of cool to be able to do some stuff like that in theory, but it'll be very hard to balance some of that, because what's really going to separate the teams in that scenario? So that's a lot of speculation, kind of based on that whole idea of should you play your own maps and possible solutions to existing problems. There are other thoughts that I have, like, you know, should I participate as a player? And that's not an easy thing to answer, because I do get an advantage by, you know, moderating the levels. But I try very hard to not get an advantage for any of that. Like, I don't help my teammates at all in day 1, and I spend way less than a day looking at the maps. I spend way less than the time that I don't spend playing the maps when starting. Like, people get really good runs really quickly during the league after the maps are released, like much faster than like the amount of time that I actually spend playtesting a level. And I'll give an entire day before I do like anything, because I don't feel like I should have that kind of advantage. Should other people be in that position too? It might be kind of awkward. I don't want to attach rules to it, but I could have more map moderators, more map playtesters in a sense, and playtesting as a role is something that is a very interesting kind of topic to get into, because we've now seen that teams aren't exactly going to playtest in some respect, but what if I just had more playtesters? If they were like me, like let's just say all of the tassers were playtesters. That seems like a good idea. That seems like a good middle ground for what I'm describing, actually. The reason why is because we can find some stuff that can be more problematic than, say, a tier 3 player might. They're not going to notice the Jorf somewhere the same way that we might as a tasser look at a level. So I mostly rely on my task skills in order to actually look at these levels when I examine them for silly gimmick kind of stuff. And that's helpful. Those are the people that I would ask first to look at levels. And because it's a small crowd, I can also probably assume that they're trustworthy, I would hope. Like if I'm trying to not get secrets out. And if it's fair for every team, then I don't have to worry about, like holding it back, holding any information back. I also, from the task perspective, found it very beneficial for my team to get involved in the process as much as they could by trying to find new strats, because I can only think of so many new strats altogether. I need a starting point, basically. Out of all of the taskers, I do actually have the least amount of tasking experience, and have been in the community for the shortest amount of time. Which is a kind of funny thing to think about when you say it. But I have been in the community for a handful of years now, so I know what I'm doing with some stuff, I guess. But for other playtesters, let's say, let's see here. I have a bunch of notes that weren't that I didn't show about some of this. Let me just see if there's anything worth saying. Does anyone have questions, by the way? Or anything they want me to talk about? Because we are just about at the end now. Not many topics left. No, I don't insult anyone in the notes. My favorite time? I'm not sure what that means. Do you mean on the clock? Like what I would pick? Because, I don't know. I'd probably pick something that allows for some boosting and some climbing, but not left boosting. Um, yeah, regarding you not participating, Zyke, um, I respect your desires to focus on stream and that kind of stuff. And it's unfortunate that we can't have something easy to show, and I don't have a good solution for that, unfortunately. But it would have still been possible to stream playing the levels. You're not really risking showing any crazy strats, most likely, as long as you don't show any replays or do any like hardcore grinding late in the league. So you could have come up with a solution. You could have participated, but it's okay that you didn't really want to. Not everyone did that could have, so you're not alone. I got a Redactyl update from Camel, who's not doing so well. That was a while ago, right? Oh no, that was recent. Let's see what's going on in Neon Enthusiast channel. Shoutouts to us. Lots of people being thanked in the Z team. A lot of salutes going on and custom custodians. A lot of nothing going on in V ceilings. I actually said that before I checked. Alright. So yeah, let's talk about map making a little bit more, because I do have some big problems with how map making worked. And there are a lot of related topics. So let me just go through the list that I have. Should there be more time for map making? I don't think so. People have more than enough time. Having more time won't improve the existing issues. I do feel strongly about that. What if maps were made before the league started? Now, this is an interesting topic right here. This is one of those like bait feedback kind of topics where it's an easy kind of suggestion to make, but I do have a problem with this, how it fits with the initial desires of the design of the league, and the reason for the league existing in the first place is that there are teams that can cooperate making maps. The teams make the maps, otherwise I legitimately don't know where the maps are going to come from. I can't trust the community enough to make enough maps generally to like create, like I can barely trust the community to make enough maps for CMR is basically what I'm saying. Like it is such a problem for some CMRs in map making because people just don't make maps in advance. And I can't have them make them close to the DLC deadline because that defeats the purpose of having them make maps in advance. So maps made in that kind of scenario would not be good fits for the league. And I'm better off just having the teams make the maps, which is just a more fun, inclusive kind of process. Now, that's not to say that there are no benefits of having maps created before the league, because in a perfect environment, maybe the most competitive environment, you would have some, non-biased map makers that aren't even going to be players. They're like, I'm a professional map maker over here, and boy do I love making competitive maps for the league when I can. And they're out there like hardcore playtesting their maps. Maybe there are even some non-player playtesters or some people to preview the maps to guarantee that they're good fits for the league. And we're talking about maps that in a perfect world are made specifically for the league, by the way. Like, they have no downsides. Alright, well, obviously that's not going to happen. Sure, in this perfect worlds, we would get to play some really good maps, and in a good setting for it. Like, everything can kind of all masterfully work together in this manner. But it's not really gonna happen that way, so you know. What if some maps were bad, right? What if some maps weren't good again? You know, what if a Slish map got in there? What if one of the map makers that I asked was secretly Slish, and then after all this time, they just replaced their map with a Slish upload? You know, that'd be pretty funny, honestly. But probably not a good fit, right? So there's a lot of trust that goes on to the map makers anyway for events. But I think there's a middle ground we could reach. So imagine this format. I have 6 teams. I have 3 teams make maps for each week. That means that in total, if I have 4 weeks, I have 12 maps. And there are 3 maps per week. Oh, but guess what? In addition to that, there are 1 or 2 maps that are made from people that made maps before the league started. You know, the wonderful middle ground that we're talking about. Now we're talking about there are 4 or 5 maps per week. You know, however many I get. But some of them were made by the teams, and 1 or 2 of them were made before the league even started. Now there would have to be some kind of process for me to, you know, make sure that these maps are good enough for the league, obviously, and the map makers would have to be on board with everything, and it'd have to be good enough, and I'd be incredibly strict about this, by the way. Like, I will just straight up cut maps if they don't match these standards. Like, I will not be joking around with any of those kinds of maps. And I'm talking about, like, gameplay, not art, by the way. I have no care at all if people make the same kind of art as the aesthetic theme. And I would, in fact, very much prefer if they didn't even bother, honestly. I don't want people to spend time making something that's not gameplay for a gameplay event, if you know what I mean. You know, that's the honest truth. But people will work on what they want to work on. Some people like to only work on aesthetics and that kind of stuff. And I have to keep telling some people to kind of reel it back in with, you know, potentially laggy scripts. Some people are more willing to do that than others. And, well, we get what we get. Teams respond to it differently than other teams. But I do really like the aesthetic samples that we've had every time, because they're such good starting points. As long as they're easy to use, like, you know, take all the Epon stuff from DLC 2 and Epon's sample files for week 4 this time. They're all really good sample files and easy to just get started with. You know, we label those kinds of layers. Very easy to get going. Now people don't like this, obviously, and that's because they like creativity and having control over the level somehow. But that's not the point of the league, you could argue. So it is tricky. I have to balance that most map makers want to do something interesting with maps, with the idea that, you know, I'm trying to force them from doing too much, because what if it backfires? Because people aren't really going to care too much about the art. They just kind of see it and they're like, that's, you know, that's good or not. But then they're just going to play the level anyway. as long as it's not a detriment to the level SSL as a whole. Which is why I'm so careful about lag, and disappointed that I had to include cow %, because that made the level very annoying to play for some people. There were very big issues that including that had, but the trade-off in this case was, you know, it's just this really unique kind of thing that people can enjoy. Not many people are gonna have to play it anyway, but you know, people are gonna have to deal with the reset time and the checkpoint lag, and there's no way to turn that off, and it's way too late in the process, where basically I just have to say no, or I have to be like, the slides by, I guess. Sometimes gameplay is like that too, if people just aren't willing to make certain changes. Like I suggested countless times to bring up the stupid endings of all of the week 3 imagination ending ripoff 3 prisms, which I told teams, just so you know, this is not the gameplay theme. The gameplay theme is not to have a stupid ending. The aesthetic theme, which does not include a dumb ending, is the theme. Some teams addressed it more than others. All of them were still pretty bad. I think Kaite was best, maybe, in regards to it. But man, were they bad endings. Especially in the first drafts for a lot of levels. You know, really not making me feel better when I had COVID and opening up all the first drafts and being like, oh my god, you did this? Oh my god, every map in week 4 has Jorfs? Why can't they just know to not have Jorfs by now? Every map in week 4 had Jorfs in their first drafts that were faster. So, should there be maps made before the league starts? Maybe a few, maybe some. I'm gonna have high expectations if there are. And I will only do it if I can guarantee that it happens. Oh yeah, it was supposed to have an art thing, and then it was just pretty empty at the end, unfortunately. I remember that. Yeah, that one was the worst offender, unfortunately. Should there be non-player map makers on teams? This is another interesting case question, because this was actually the first time where we could have done that. This was the first case where, with this structure, because not all players competed or had to compete, then players could have done this. But no one really decided to do it, or no one that wanted to do it felt comfortable enough in their teams to justify only contributing in this way. This was especially more the case with the more inactive teams. So there are definitely some people that, you know, wouldn't have wanted to play as much, but had to play more than they wanted to. And this includes some potential map makers that would not have competed if they didn't have to. And they didn't have to, but I mean, their team kind of required them to do it. I think having non-scoring players in general is okay on your team. It does depend on the format. In DLC 2, it would not have made sense because, well, you have one player per character each week. You have a 4-person team, so you can't have one of the 4 not be able to play, but you could have a 5th player You could have a moral support player, map maker kind of player that only does routing some weeks, and maybe that fifth player, they play kid half the time. You know, you could take different weeks off basically. That seems like it would have been fine for DLC 2. And I suggested it in a couple occasions, but we didn't actually end up seeing it used that way. But it's something that I think is fine. It's just something I can work into the structure of the league better. This time it was not as convenient because the teams were not as flexible as desired. The teams required a certain amount of roles being filled, obviously, each week. But there, like I said, there has to be some middle ground. Not just for things like that, but for things for you know, making maps in advance. There's probably some middle ground to be had there with that 6-person or that 6-team idea that I suggested. We have 6 teams. The week 1 maps come from teams 1, 2, 3. The week 2 maps come from 4, 5, 6. Repeat for 3 and 4. And then for each week, we also have 1 or 2 non-team maps made by people outside of the league that we're not competing. Or they could have just made it in advance. They could still compete. But that would be a little trickier to manage mechanically, because now those players have an advantage on those maps. Like if I asked Camel to make some maps in advance, he'd probably do it, but now Camel's got an advantage that I'm sure he would say is justified, given that he was the 4th place out of the 4 tier 0 players this time. But then we'd have people like Dello and like C in DLC 1. C did really well on Corridor, for example. And Dello always does reasonably well on Dello maps. Like, if we had a hard temp map, that would be similar too. So, at least the easier those kinds of levels are, the less I have to worry about. And if I have a group of, say, tassers look at it in advance to look for certain things, or if I had, like, you know, let's say Camel's included in this group of possible early map makers. Well, let's just say I had Camel's tier of players. They were also able to see the map, as long as, you know, please don't leak maps. There's a lot more people I have to trust in those situations, but I would be hopeful that, you know, I get feedback from people like, say, Fishy and Nuckies in that kind of scenario, because they would be able to come up with strats that map makers wouldn't really think of, and would be able to get the playtesting out of the way and like these goal times, that idea. But that's map makers. What about volunteer players? Volunteer playtesters. Now, we're talking about specifically non-player volunteer playtesters that will check out the maps in advance, and they're not scoring on anything, so it doesn't matter that they can see it and verify that the maps are legitimate, the strats are legitimate. This is something that I've turned down multiple times, and one of the main reasons why is because I would only trust them if they can do a very thorough job handling maps. And I don't really get that impression from anyone that kind of offhandedly says, like, I'd be down. You know, not to take any quotes kind of out of context, but I am very skeptical when I read very simple kinds of like, yeah, I'd be willing to playtest, I guess. Those kinds of remarks, because they're coming from people that aren't willing to play, but they're willing to playtest. That rubs me the wrong way, because I think playtesting, if you're gonna treat it seriously, you have to treat it seriously. Like, we're actually trying to make good maps. Otherwise, they're serving a totally useless role if they don't put in any effort. Like, are they gonna find the strats that are stupid to play? Are they gonna find that one heavy that barely works? That like someone else found and everybody else is gonna have to grind? Do they spend enough time on the maps to really cover that kind of stuff? It goes without saying that more playtesting will improve map playability significantly. And also the enjoyment of grinding maps by like getting rid of like the annoying parts. But there's so much time that's built into the map making schedule for playtesting because drafts are required so early that like I shouldn't need to rely on other playtesters, right? Especially if they're not even gonna play the maps that much. In fact, what I do instead is if people say that they want to playtest, I say, "Are you sure you don't want to just play instead? That would be easier. That would be easier than playtesting." You know, that's what I want to say. I don't actually say exactly that. Are you sure you don't want to just, you know, play instead if you're gonna play at all? Because what you're describing you want to do is much less than what I want. It's much less than what you would do if you were to actually play in the league. Or not, that's the wrong way to describe it. What you would be doing as playtesting would be less than what the people that would actually play the levels would be doing in the first like hour. So, you know, that 1 hour of finding new strats, there's so many unintended routes that are worked out in the first hour just because we finally have eyes on it. And we could have had something like that from the mapmaker team. So it's tricky. It's really tricky to require teams to playtest because of, you know, the controversy of not scoring, should they or should they not score on their map. Not scoring removes that desire, and they don't want to put in too much effort. But I like that idea that I previously talked about with requiring a video and some times. This seems like a good idea. Like, I only need a video of the best run, and then I just need example times for maybe tiers, gold times. Seems like a good idea. But no matter how much playtesting is, it's not like we'll guarantee we catch everything problematic. In reality, I still don't really have that much control that I exercise over maps. Some people will make changes, some people won't make changes. If people continue to put me in that kind of awkward position where like I either have to accept it or decline it, and they're not willing to change it, then I'm gonna decline some of them sometimes. You know, I'm more tempted to every time to just decline it. It's very easy to just say no, because I don't have to put that in the Nexus. I don't have to put that in the spreadsheet. But I don't want them to put me in that awkward position, especially because they do things so close to the deadline. In fact, a lot of the times I'm actually forced to ignore themes when considering some of the maps, just because some people will only work on what they want to. Themes do serve a very good purpose of adding a similarity to maps each week, visually at least, and there's no reason to remove it. They also obviously prevent people from taking maps that they previously made and repurposing them for the league. That's one of the main reasons for having themes. That was a core idea in the first place. It's also just something different for map makers to do. But it's just easy to abuse. I rely on good faith when considering these kinds of design decisions, because I need to rely on, you know, the good faith map maker, the good faith team, and that's risky. It was a lot more risky for week 4 maps, when like only one team hit the final deadline, and like Zealous Zips did hit the final deadline kind of, and then it added cow percent during week 3. But I mean, it could have turned out differently. They could have actually made something bad. You know, that would have been a funny no. To just be like, all right, well, sorry, we're just gonna have to take out the script. You know, it actually lags too much now. But without that kind of communication between me and map makers and getting it done early enough in the process, we're gonna run into situations like that. DLC 1 had pretty noteworthy re-uploads every week, because there wasn't enough of that, so I had to be more on top of it. And they have different kind of re-uploads too in DLC 1. One of them was more gameplay related, one of them was more lag related, but you know, I have to enforce it to some degree. So by saying all this, hopefully people don't think about abusing it more, or otherwise I will actually have to be strict. So I appreciate that people continue to be, you know, good-spirited about this kind of thing and be on the same page. Final thing, how can people volunteer? How can you guys make my life easier when it comes to the league? Well, there's less overhead than you guys might think. I do put together some polls every week, but they're pretty straightforward. There is downtime, you know, I don't have to play the entire time. There's not really that much that I have to do when it's ongoing. Like, I just have scripts that I wrote in advance. So most noteworthy ways that I could get help from people would be stuff like advertising, getting their friends to sign up. If anyone is interested in actual design of mechanics and these systems, I enjoy having these kinds of conversations. You know, this was quite an extended window this time, because I felt like I had to do it justice once I got going. You know, I kind of got the feel for how this stream was going. I was like, I could cut it short like I initially intended, but I mean, not that many people really left, and if you want to watch the VOD, go ahead. It's kind of like the cool hangout session. I was kind of intending to be in an open voice channel, so if any of you guys want to, you know, ask me questions live, not in chat, I'm now currently in the DLC general, if you want to just hang out for a little bit. So consider that an open invitational for on-the-spot Q&A, I guess, or other comments and ideas. If you have ideas, I do have that feedback form. I went through a lot of the feedback that people submitted so far, and I'm thankful for all that. You know, I do read it all. And you're welcome to the people that say thanks for putting this on, obviously. What's up?
Was my form influential for the goal time thingy?
For the goal time thingy? You were the only one that said it, from what I remember. So, you know, it was good to see that idea be represented. Because it is something that I've sat on a little bit from DLC 1. and I wasn't able to do anything about it these last 2 DLCs. So, yeah, it's good to have a response about that, kind of to further shape that idea. I had a pretty good talk with Maybetta recently about similar things, actually. So, yeah, I've been in talks with a variety of people about various ideas. Any other people want to join? Any other comments out there? Any questions?
Any other ideas?
Ideas?
You said you had like a lot of talk with a lot of people about a variety of ideas.
I said a
What
bunch
is,
of possible DLC 4 ideas actually already.
Sure. So like they were mentioned on stream. Nothing.
Yeah, I already went through a lot of them.
Okay.
Let's see if I have anything else on that list. Dogs very clearly won this time, somehow. I'm very much a dog fan. I don't think there were any dog barking sound effects today. But usually when I stream, there's a barking dog that likes to chime in. Yeah, so I talked about scoring at multiple intervals during the week. That addresses a few ideas, like sniping. Mapmaker teams in this scenario, I'd probably allow them to play on their own levels, but I'd probably discount them only from the first interval. Like, they're allowed to play the levels, they just don't score points for the first day, is what I'm talking about. And the final interval can be worth the most, potentially, like, 2 times as much.
You aren't concerned that it turns into too much work for people who can't play as much?
For what?
Like,
oh, you mean as often? It is a concern.
Like currently when I sign up and I think, okay, I can only play on the weekend, during the week I have too much to do. If you have like this interval scoring, then I would miss out on whatever half of the points I can collect, because I would only really play the map starting Saturday. While
Yeah.
currently I can get whatever points I can get, which I guess is none anyway, but for other people it might be different.
I mean, it's a concern for sure. And there's not like an easy idea for such an early idea to solve it so far. Like, at this time of DLC 2, I had similar ideas about DLC 3. And then it gradually worked into including the wager system and the way that I handled rules for inactivity. I can also have ways to stagger how maps are released and the scheduling of these. Like, they would also be scheduled based on time zones. I would stagger the time zone deadline, basically. I would probably at least address that it requires a certain activity level of players, because the way that I see it, the league doesn't always need to be very inclusive. Sometimes it can be more competitive, sometimes it can be more casual. And for a more competitive version, I can still include the casual players if they're not actually scoring in the same manner. So with stuff like the idea for achievements or medals or trophies or something for placing within certain tiers, and these tiers are they refer to goal times. Like, there are multiple time thresholds on the level. Not just like 1 second is worth 1 point, but like, hey, you're in the bronze tier. Hey, I made platinum today. And those would be clear goals that people that are just playing whatever levels they want, they don't really have to do that by a certain point exactly, and they can still compete. But then you have the actual interval thing, the thing that has competition behind it, that's for the people that are interested in it. So, like, I'm very specifically separating the competitive and the casual, or the active and the inactive. So that's one way that it kind of addresses the problem, just because of its design. There's more to there's more to the league than just what is available to the top players, and the top players don't just get all of the benefits to the bottom players as well. So I'm sure there will be depth to the format as a whole. Random idea: instead of tiers, have the point difference between places be higher the further down the leaderboard you go. More incentive for going up the ranks than lower. I feel like that might be more demotivating for the bottom, because it's kind of top heavy in that design. That's kind of a knee-jerk kind of response, like in thinking about it. It'll really make the bottom players feel like they're on the bottom, at the very least. And the bottom players are so far on the bottom, by the way. Like, we have some new players sign up every now and then. Like, you know how these tiers could have tiers within themselves? Like, you can't just say that 6 tiers is enough, basically, for any accurate representation, for example. And similarly, with DLC 1, what we had was actually a little bit more similar to that, where there were bonuses for being on top, but every single placing had a difference. So, you know, it wasn't quite as spread out at the bottom, points wise, as that idea. It was a little bit more spread out at the top. But when every single position has a point attached, it might, what ended up happening was, you know, everything mattered. It was just potentially so much more exhausting to everybody. There was so much to do and it all counted. That obviously benefited when I switched it to, you know, only 4 out of the 6 leaderboards even count for DLC 2 from DLC 1, instead of there being 12 leaderboards and they all count. And you can play as much as you want. And the teams weren't exactly intended to be balanced, they were just an open draft. So, it very much favored the active players in that model. And that was okay, it was still a lot of fun, but we can do some other fun stuff, like the 4-player teams, all-star teams. Which, maybe we'll return to that at some point, but I mean, we do DLC rarely enough, and there are other ideas that we can try out. Signing up for certain intervals also sounds like it could be good. I was also thinking of staggering map releases. So imagine that we don't have weeks anymore. We have, yeah, that is what I understood, Glass. But imagine we don't have weeks anymore. Let's say we still have 2 halves to the league. So there are 2 phases. Maybe that's what we'd be calling it, or halves, or whatever. And during these phases, maps are released on different days. So they're not all released at the same time. Maybe one of them's released every other day. Maybe 2 of them are released every 3 days. And with this staggered kind of schedule, what we can do is end up, say, you know, we could reveal replays on different maps at different times. So there's always, like, you know, something going on every day or two. You know, something potentially cool to watch. And the leaderboards still keep going. They would have different staggered lifetimes, and you're signing up for certain levels in this model potentially. It's a little awkward in that sense, though. A downside is you don't actually know what you're signing up for. It might be a level you didn't really care for, and that's a risk that we might have to take if we go that route. But as long as there are still options, then, you know, if you're signing up for the interval, then that could be okay. Maybe people are limited to a certain number of maps they can still compete on. But ultimately, there are a lot of possibilities. And I am toying with the idea of changing how weeks work. It's something that I think is the easiest target that people might not actually think about, because it seems so natural. You know, you have weeks, but hey, I want to change things up, and if I change how weeks work, then, you know, I might be affecting a little bit more outside of the league itself, but it sure would make the league a little bit different, and that's the goal. You know, variety will be good. Maya the dog is voicing opinions. Alright, I'm probably gonna wrap this up then, unless there's anything else. Any final questions or comments? If not, now's the time to thank me, I guess, if you were gonna say it anyway. No thanks? Alright, well, it's a thankless job, you know. I don't mind, I enjoy putting together this kind of stuff. Everybody's already thanked me. We have 2 streamers. We have Avenged playing SSL Saturday. We also have whoever this new recent streamer is, Fair Jamie, something like that. Do you guys want to say hi to Neon Captain, or our new player who says this game looks like a health hazard, but they have a bunch of viewers? Thanks everyone for participating in the event. You know, it wouldn't be what it is unless we have a bunch of people. So, I very much appreciate seeing this be such a popular event, and I would like to continue to make events very open to people. If you want to go say hi to Avenged, go say hi. You know, you can find it in the Discord. But we're gonna raid our new player. Well, if you're curious about future Dustforce events, there are some neat ideas that we've talked about recently, including a new event that maybe some people will be interested in seeing. So get excited for that, but look for it in the Dustforce Discord. If I had to guess, the next event is going to be a map jam, because we like to do things with less effort after, you know, a very high effort league. So, yeah, if I had to guess, it's gonna be a map jam, and maybe we'll do it in about a month. So, I look forward to it too. I actually already know what the theme is gonna be. I've been sitting on that one for a while, so definitely look forward to the map jam. As for a CMR, if you're interested in a CMR, talk to Skyhawk. Tell him that you want to make a map for the CMR. Everybody go DM Skyhawk and say like, hey, I got a map for a CMR, perhaps. I don't know when the next CMR is going to be, but there will definitely be one this year. You know, it goes without question that there will be one this year. I do think it's smarter to have a map jam first, though, because, well, we can. I think we auto-rated now. Alright.